Hello, and thank you for joining me. I want to speak briefly, if I may, about Sir Roger Moore, who has sadly passed away 5 days ago. I don't do this with every public figure, but Sir Roger Moore is someone whose work I knew very well, of course, for the Bond series, as with millions of other people. But that really is a testament to the man that he was, an instantly recognizable figure. Um, Before talking about his work on Bond, which is, of course, what he is best remembered for, I want to give a little bit of background to his life before that. He was born in 1927 in Stockwell, South London, and one of his earliest public roles was actually for, and I was surprised by this when the obituaries were coming through, of he would do advertisements for knitting wear, men's cardigans, basically. It's quite an amusing public role, really, back in the 1940s. Some of his early work included Ivanhoe and, of course, The Saint, which admittedly I never was very familiar with. My mother watched that. She also was very familiar with Sir Roger Moore and his Bond roles, and she was saddened by his loss. I think she won't mind me saying that, um, because she had basically grown up with him. Obviously, although his Bond was just before my time, I was born in 1985, which was the year of his last film as Bond. I have the whole series. I wouldn't call myself a super fan, but I'm into the series enough to be, to be fond of the different films and the different characters and the locations and all the rest of it. Um, Roger Moore had the very difficult task of filling Sean Connery's shoes. It is true that George Lazenby was the first actor to follow Connery, but he only done one film, which incidentally I think it would be a little bit unfair to judge him from. There was issues with tensions he had with his co-star and so on. But basically, Roger Moore had to fill Connery's shoes, and this was at a time when the 007 series was in a little bit of a hiatus, because after Connery, there were questions: can this continue? Connery was, of course, an archetypal Bond, and the two men couldn't be more different. I mean, Roger Moore was basically upper crust English. Sean Connery was a little bit of a gritty, tough Scotsman. Um, and their personality is very different, I think it's fair to say, and I think both actors would agree with that. Um, so Roger Moore knew he could never be this sort of gritty character that Sean Connery brought. That I think he once joked that with Sean Connery you have someone who could kill you in his character. With me, I just brought the humour to it. That's basically what he done. In a sense, he made the Bond films a little bit more family friendly. Now, purists might not entirely like that. Um, and I think by his own admission, he was never a very, very in depth actor. He never took it entirely seriously. Yet he nevertheless had a great accomplishment of not being a great in depth actor, yet still nevertheless managing to become an iconic figure in his own right. Because I think, although Connery is the archetypal Bond, it's impossible to talk about James Bond without thinking of Sir Roger Moore, because he was so dominant. I mean, he'd done more films than any of the actors, including Sean Connery. Connery done 6 films, Moore done 7. So the 7 films between 1973 and 1985. Sean Connery briefly came back in 1971 after George Lazenby's installment. Actually, incidentally, whilst he was playing the role of the Saint, there had been some sort of half-hearted discussions about, in a joking sense, I could do a Bond. Well, he eventually ended up being cast, and I think it was a good choice. I really do think he brought something to the series. So the 7 films were Live and Let Die, which I will discuss in a second, The Man with the Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, and A View to a Kill. Now, admittedly, some of those films are definitely seen as the more weaker and, frankly, a little bit ridiculous in the film series. By the time A View to a Kill came around, 1985, Roger Moore was 58, so he was getting on, and it wouldn't be another 2 years until they cast Timothy Dalton in The Living Daylights. Nevertheless, even the weaker films I think had their moments. Moonraker has a great scene. Bond lured to the pyramid. I think John Barry's score was fantastic. It really worked with that. But admittedly, the series had hit a bit of a parody point where, you were having fights in space and so on. Now, Live and Let Die, as I say, was his first installment. It's one of my personal favourites. It's a typical 70s film. There's black exploitation there. There's a famous scene where he goes into Harlem. He's the only white guy there. But I love the fact they sort of underestimate him. They think, oh, who's this posh British guy? But it turns out to be actually quite tough. And that's typical of Roger Moore's humorous aspect of the Bond series. Now, Live and Let Die, one of my earliest memories actually is being in my grandmother's house in rural Northern Ireland, and old UTV ads advertising those early Bond films, and it's like Easter Monday, 007 comes to your screens. Incidentally, his first two films, Live and Let Die and The Man with the Golden Gun, Clifton James had a secondary role as a bit of a redneck southern police officer, complete opposite of Roger Moore's character. You mean the Englishman? We have to get the Englishman with a gun? Something along those lines. But he's a real redneck, and coincidentally, he passed away himself a few months ago. That's a bit of a coincidence. Clifton James, who played that role as Sergeant Pepper. Really amusing role, and I suppose you could say it's a bit dated now, but I think the Moore films really did bring something to it. Live and Let Die, I used to always remember the cackling Baron Samedi. As a kid, it was kind of scary, actually. Jane Seymour, stunningly beautiful lady. Real chemistry between them. The thing about Roger Moore's Bond, he never quite had the grittiness of Connery, but he certainly had the suaveness, at least in terms of maybe not the coolness, but he definitely managed to pull off the British gent, and that's something he will always be remembered for. But by the mid-80s, by his own admission, he was getting a bit older and he just didn't really want to do it anymore. So after Bond, Roger Moore became known for his humanitarian work. Now, a lot of celebrities do this, but in the case of Sir Roger Moore, it really was, I think, driven by personal conviction. His friend Audrey Hepburn had been a UNICEF ambassador, so he himself became a UNICEF ambassador. And I think it's an interesting thing that a man that played the role of the world's most ruthless secret agent off screen was such a humanitarian, really a gentle giant in some ways. I say giant because he was quite a tall man, but he'd done UNICEF work. He was also outspoken on animal welfare issues. He publicly campaigned against foie gras, which led to Selfridges bringing it off their stock. He was a supporter of the Conservative Party, but he was never overly political. Last year, when Theresa May ran for Conservative leader, apparently her team approached Sir Roger Moore and asked if he would, sort of play the Bond to her M. She had served as Home Secretary, but he declined, and he cited his work with UNICEF overrided that. So he was politically conservative, but he was never very outspoken about it. As I understand it, he donated to the Conservative Party. So that is the sad passing of Sir Roger Moore. Another high-profile death in Britain recently was Rhodri Morgan. He was the First Minister of Wales. In the 1990s, the Blair government introduced devolution. And with that, that basically gave devolved powers to the regional governments of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, free of Britain's home nations, free of the United Kingdom's home nations. So Rhodri Morgan, who was a Labour politician, was the first minister of modern Wales, in a sense, the founding father of modern Wales. But he was a unionist, a member of the Labour Party, so he was a figure of devolution, but nevertheless not a nationalist in the sense of not being about Wales breaking away from the United Kingdom. So Rhodri Morgan sadly passed away at 77. He was widely respected in Welsh politics and beyond. And At his funeral service, his wife spoke about his requirement that people donate to charity rather than bringing flowers, and I think really that's a testament to the man. Apparently, she also said he enjoyed life and he led life to the full. He was known for his wits. He was known for his love of Wales. There were tributes in the Welsh Parliament from First Minister Carwyn Jones, from the leader of Plaid Cymru, Liam Wood, and she stressed the wit that he had, um, and she called him a patriot, which is really quite telling. So he will not be forgotten, and he has definitely secured his place in history. So that was quite an accomplished life. Rhodri Morgan, really the personification, a giant, if you like, of modern Welsh politics, and I would say modern British politics. And he served as First Minister from 2000 to 2009. Other prominent deaths recently have been, and I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski served as Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, and he dealt with some very major issues of the day, including the aborted attempt to free American hostages in Iran. However, he was a controversial figure. He was a very hawkish figure, quite certainly more right wing and hawkish than Jimmy Carter himself. But I think it's fair to say he's one of the best known public figures. Henry Kissinger obviously is probably the best known outside presidents themselves. But Zbigniew Brzezinski is definitely, if you had to select sort of 10 American diplomats, American figures outside presidents of the last 50 years, I think it's fair to say Zbigniew Brzezinski made his mark on history. Um, he was a controversial figure as a hawk. However, much in the same way that Henry Kissinger was. However, he was respected in many quarters for his role in helping to thaw American-Chinese relations. And he once said that the two statesmen he most respected was Richard Nixon and Deng Xiaoping. So within China, he was also well respected. He passed away at the age of 89. Another prominent figure, Roger Ailes, the founder of Fox News, who passed away at 77. And there have been others, but those have been a few figures in recent days. So Roger Moore, Rhodri Morgan, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and Roger Ailes. And like I said, I don't usually do these videos on people who have passed away, but particularly with Roger Moore, he's not going to be forgotten. Um, the thing about actors in general, so long as people watch the films, their memory is going to live forever. And I think that's really the beauty of an actor's legacy. But people should remember Roger Moore not just as for his humorous stint as Bond and for the role that he brought to that. And I think he, in a sense, made, although Sean Connery will forever be the archetypal Bond, I think Roger Moore has definitely cast his own print on the Bond series and brought something to it. I mean, he was, in a sense, the most dominant Bond in the sense of doing the most films. Um, so let me know your own thoughts, your memories of Sir Roger Moore. I think it's right that he is remembered for his humanitarian efforts as well. Um, all round a thoroughly decent man and a true British gent. So he will be sadly missed by many people. So let me know your thoughts and thank you for watching.